Hello, welcome to the Inspirante Education Podcast, where we discuss different topics pertaining to education and career goals, including interviews of different people and discussions about different events occurring in the world today.
Hi, my name is Rishabh Pandey and I'm a rising junior at Vanderbilt High. I enjoy learning about business and computer science, and I'm also a part of the Limerick Deca Club. I'm able to code in Java, Python, and Swift, and I'm also the captain of the Limerick water polo team. In my spare time, I really enjoy building apps.
Hello, I'm Rishabh Pandey from the Inspirante podcast, and today with me I have Nishant Jain. Nishant, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, nice. I'm glad to be here, Rishabh. Thank you. My name is Nishant Jain, and I'm a freshman at Vanderbilt University studying computer science and economics. And once again, thanks for having me here, Rishabh, today. Excited to answer some questions.
Good to have you. All right. You said that you are currently a freshman at Vanderbilt University. What are you majoring in currently?
So I'm currently majoring in computer science and economics. So double majoring is actually the correct term, the correct way of putting it, right? And I'm a rising sophomore at the moment. Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. So what kind of, so you're doing computer science and economics. These are two things that, I have sort of a passion in. What kind of influenced you to choose to double major in computer science and economics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the biggest things that I really felt was like a guiding factor for me to choose CS especially was I think taking AP computer science as a sophomore was a very good experience because at first the class really didn't go well for me, right? And I was expecting to kind of walk into it and do really well at first. But, because I heard that, it's not that hard of a class. And I just heard a lot of stuff from my friends. But originally it didn't really go that well for me. And then I really had to work a lot in that class, but I slowly developed and then towards the end of the year after I guess I really sat down to study Java a lot. After that, I was doing a lot better in the class. And that just really opened me up to how you can use CS to literally do basically anything online, can make websites, make apps. I really enjoyed that creative aspect to it, which is why I think CS was my primary choice. And then econ, I think my guiding force behind that, I've always been very interested in just the market in general, how the economy functions. I was in high school, I did the economics club. I was president of that at Stevenson, and that was just really good time in general. I just enjoyed sort of reading about and discussing economics with my teachers. So I started sort of a long response, but that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. So, it's like a club that kind of got you really interested into economics, kind of got you into that field.
Yeah, exactly. I think especially my teacher in that club, the sponsor of that club, I think his name was James Kohler, right? He was the person I think who most inspired me to really, he most kindled my interest in economics because just he would always sit down with us, discuss current issues in the economy, current issues, and even politics that were affected by economic factors. And essentially, I think that those discussions and sort of seeing his input was what really kind of wanted me to go into this industry in this field of economics and sort of see how I can use CS with finance or business. I think that's kind of where I'm at in a career-wise aspect.
That's interesting. And I remember you said that you kind of going into AP Computer Science as a sophomore, you kind of struggled in the beginning, and later near the end of the year, you kind of really developed that interest, got that spark. How did you kind of push yourself to really commit to computer science? Like how did you push yourself to get that interest? Because that's a pretty big change, right? Going from in the beginning struggling in the class to eventually having it as a major, right? It's kind of a big change. What kind of got you to that point?
That's a good question, Rashab. So I think that the biggest thing for me personally was that I think just doing oftentimes just coding with people, and especially coding with your friends, working on things, not just copying off each other. I think that's sort of what really kills a lot of people's enthusiasm in CS, is that it's very easy to just look at what your friend is doing in a particular homework problem. But I think the biggest thing for me was small victories. I think where I would successfully solve a program after grinding on it for maybe an hour or two, maybe longer, right? I would sit and grind on a program, say, okay, I'm not going to leave until I get this right. And then, just adding up from those small victories, saying, okay, I got this right. And then let's do this quiz, getting better grades on the quiz because I now finally understand how to do the homework, and sort of building up on top of those foundational initial victories. I think that was what really kindled my interest. And then the biggest part was the projects we did in class, such as blackjack projects, and just in general, we actually made games which I thought were more developed than I expected, and they were more impressive than I had thought that we would actually cover in the class. And I think that was what really kindled my re-interest in the computer science.
Yeah, so just basic small collaboration, getting that teamwork aspect of it into it, associating it with your grades in school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
Exactly.
good. Yeah, and so of course, as with any group project, I guess you kind of have to have an established work ethic, right? And not only in your AP computer science class, right? I'm sure for any class that you ever take, you're going to need to have a really solid work ethic, right? So could you explain, I guess, or describe your work ethic throughout high school and college, now that you've kind of finished freshman year at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd like to.
How did it evolve, I guess?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so how did it evolve, I guess, from freshman year of high school to your freshman year of college?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I think that this is especially targeted for me because my freshman year of high school, I was not a very good student at all. And I think my first semester was really kind of tough for me for my freshman year of high school I'm talking about. So this was 4 years ago, right? And it was tough because I think, it's tough for many students, but in particular for me, my grades were actually quite low first semester. And I think it's because I hadn't developed those initial study skills, which really carried me throughout the rest of my high school experience. And I think a lot of those really had to do with maintaining a to-do list. For me, I really benefited from scheduling my workout, scheduling my day. And this is something that a lot of people sort of live by. And before I started doing this, I was kind of lacking in my organizational abilities. I didn't really have any structure to my day, right? I would just come back, let's say from an after-school activity, maybe rest for a while, then start homework. I didn't plan stuff as well as I should have. But then after freshman year, first semester, that's when I really started taking planning into account for just everything I did. I started planning out when I would start studying for tests. I would stop cramming. I would start being more proactive about homework in general. And that's when I sort of saw a big uplift in my grades in high school. And to be frank, that's the same strategy I'm using in college as well. Just really planning everything, getting homework done, as soon as it's assigned, being on top of it, and going to office hours, going to teachers after school if needed. There's no point in going if you don't actually need to. But if you do need to, it will always help. That's what I would advise any high school student, sort of for going into after school help. There's no shame. I mean, again, I don't advise going in for no reason, but if you genuinely don't understand something, then it's, I think, one of the best ways to improve your grades. So I guess that's a little bit about my work ethic. I've been talking for a while, but
yeah, that completely makes sense. Yeah, so for any of our kind of younger listeners right now who are kind of transitioning into freshman year of high school, it's kind of, as you had said, Nishant, it's really important to kind of keep your day organized, staying on top of everything. Mm-hmm. Procrastination is just not going to help in the long term at all.
Exactly. And, that doesn't mean that don't have fun. Like, for example, I would also plan out, okay, from this time, let's say 6 to 8 p.m., I want to go work out. I want to, play. I want to do this, hang out with friends. Just as long as you have an overall idea, and you don't have to plan it out hour by hour either, just making a to-do list of saying things like, okay, today this has to get done. Let's say, my Euro homework needs to get done. My BC homework needs to get done. And that's it. Just crossing things off the list has been proven to be a very, motivating experience for humans in general when they cross things off a to-do list, right? So just even having one will automatically boost productivity for any high schooler, I feel. So.
I definitely get that. Yeah, I'd say actually, the planners that you get at the beginning of school, those were one of the main reasons why I actually did so good in freshman year. I would always have, everything planned out, maybe like a month in advance for a test. And I'd always know, when to start studying, when to stop studying, and I knew how to balance, I guess, that work-life
Yeah,
kind of ratio.
that's excellent. Yeah, and that's kind of what I figured out after first semester, and that's fine because it was first semester. That's kind of, I would say,
Yeah.
freshman year in general, students have some leeway in terms of their grades, but first semester for me kind of was an eye opener in that sense, where it showed me that I really had to, unlike middle school, begin planning things out, planning my day and structuring it to some element.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. And kind of pushing yourself to this, right? This kind of, it can't be easy, right? Of course, you had your own, I guess, obstacles, right, to get past, to kind of push yourself and motivate yourself,
Right.
to kind of start, like, staying on top of everything, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's like, pressure in school from your friends, right? So how did you kind of cope with all these things, right? Like all of these, things combined, they could have like barred you from achieving your goals, right? But ultimately, where you are right now, like, how did you cope with it? How did you like get past all of these obstacles?
Yeah, so I think a big thing is, personally for me, I had different. I think the biggest thing was friends. Honestly, I think that just hanging out with and socializing with people can often be, a calming experience. But something that I often get is sometimes your friends are people that may be, competitive, or sometimes that actually contributes to stress. I've seen a lot of friends, especially in cutthroat high school environments, end up only focusing on academics, and sometimes that group actually ends up being the cause of stress. So I'd also recommend to high schoolers as a way of coping, sort of learning other hobbies like playing music, for example, or even just working out. Um, Learning to take time for yourself, for example, just trying to just surf the web, for example, for an hour, taking a break, clearing your head is something that I think is very valuable. And just sort of, again, it comes back to the planning aspect, just planning out your day in terms of just knowing that this time I will reserve for myself, for my own mental health, and everything else is going to be squeezed into these fragments. I think that really goes a long way in terms of ensuring somebody is happy. But the biggest things I would say are making time for yourself to watch that Netflix movie, or, listen to music, play some music, socialize with friends. Those are all great coping mechanisms, great and healthy ones, I'd say.
Yeah, so that's kind of how you got over, that's how you dealt with peer pressure, right? Making time and saving time for yourself to do whatever you want, kind of
Exactly.
be
Yeah.
independent of your friends and other people in your life.
Right. And I can't stress also, spending time with your family is a big one too, especially because, sometimes in high school, the bustle and hustle can turn people against their parents a little bit. And, that's not like, this doesn't, this isn't necessarily something that always happens, but I definitely have seen that sometimes the whole college application process can sort of stress the relationship between parents and students, right? And that's a healthy thing because parents obviously want to push their students and their kids, right? But as a kid, it can become very easy to be frustrated with your parents. But I think something that really is healthy for families in general going through a college application process is having weekends where you spend, like, let's say a night not talking about college, maybe just enjoying an activity, going out to dinner or something, and maybe instead of stressing out about applications, you guys say, okay, we will talk about them from, again, planning it out. We will talk about them from this time to this time, and then we kind of will avoid that topic to preserve harmony. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Kind of ultimately it always bubbles down to, taking time for yourself, kind of organizing your time, right? It always comes down to taking a break once in a while. You just need a break. You can't go on, full throttle forever, right? Everybody needs breaks.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And doing things like, for example, at your own school, um, for joining different clubs, just not for the sake of beefing your resume. I'm not saying that people shouldn't do clubs that will help their application, but I also think people should have a healthy balance between what they enjoy and what they sort of do for, I guess, application purposes. And ideally, those two things should align.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah, that's good. So kind of moving on a little bit here. So clubs, right? clubs and extracurriculars, kind of important for college like application, right?
Right.
So could you mind, just list some of the activities that you did and kind of, what motivated you to them? So I know one of them was the economics club, right?
Yeah.
Were there
Exactly.
any other clubs that you were like a part of during your time at Stevenson or?
Yeah. So there was tons of clubs at Stevenson. So this is Stevenson High School. So basically, this high school had like over 300 clubs, and honestly, it's kind of known for being like that, like semi-university type of high school, right? So I was involved in quite a few other clubs. I mentioned economics clubs specifically because I that was the organization in which my involvement was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
deepest. I was most involved in that one, but a few other ones include congressional debate, the STEM club at my school, the computer science club, as well as the Model United Nations club, which is a public speaking club, and lastly FBLA, which is pretty common over the United States. It
Yeah,
stands for
yeah.
yeah.
So overall, I guess all of the clubs that you took and kind of participated in, they all kind of had some, kind of aspect into relating into what majors you took, right? Because, FBLA and all these speaking clubs, right? They kind of help you just kind of in general, right? And then taking stuff like computer science and STEM clubs, right? So would you say that clubs are relatively like a pretty important part in
Uh,
deciding what major to choose while going into college?
Yeah, I'd definitely say so. I would say that clubs are probably probably the third biggest factor of admissions, third or fourth biggest factor. And the reason I say that it's sort of with a grain of salt as well. And I think that clubs do offer a lot of advantages in terms of potential new recommendation letters, new experiences, awards. But I also think that there's a few key things people should focus on in their involvement in a club. And a few of those things include if you are in a club that is non-competitive in an aspect, uh, your involvement in that club is, to be frank, a little bit devalued. For example, clubs like, let's say, an environmentalist club, right? And again, I'm not saying that this is anything wrong to be in that club. I would actually encourage students to, again, follow their passions and do things that are
Yeah, of course.
conducive for a healthy balance, right? But I was just saying, sort of like clubs that don't offer a competitive basis or any sort of competition are a little bit devalued in terms of the admissions process. So I'd recommend that people investigate more clubs, like for example, that have that competitive element in a little bit of that, because
Yeah,
again,
so when you say competitive element, I'm assuming you're referring to kind of getting officer positions, right? Something of the sort.
yeah, that or maybe also just just for example, debate has like speech tournaments, and Model UN has conferences. For example, my STEM club has competitions as well. So just things like that. But also, yes, things like getting positions in the club do matter. But a lot of those, again, colleges are becoming more wary. I feel this is my own personal opinion, honestly, and I,
Mhm.
you know, this is my personal opinion that I think that colleges are placing less emphasis on like arbitrary titles just because of the sheer amount of applicants who have different titles, different positions and clubs. So I would almost argue that at this point it's more valuable for people to focus on attaining different sort of awards in competitive clubs and higher level positions rather than sort of just being a member.
Okay, yeah. So kind of getting that officer position, getting that first place in tournament. All of these are
Yeah,
kind of valued more than just normal titles.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, just saying like, okay, I was a treasurer of debate, and I'm saying that personally because that's a position that was at my school for my debate club, right?
Hmm.
Maybe, for example, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when the admissions process was a little bit less competitive, I would say that would be pretty big, like that would look considerably good. But today, with the influx of applicants and just in general criteria becoming more stringent, I would say that colleges are looking more for people who excel in those clubs in different ways, who are bringing glory to the school, bringing talent, not just a member.
Yeah. So how, like, of course, bringing talent and glory to the school, of course, all of that is important. How important would you say would be kind of like leaving an impact on the club? So say you make a club and say that, once you enter or once you like enter college, or, once you're out of that high school, that club stays and it thrives and grows. How important would you say that is for
I
the
would say
admissions
that
process?
yeah, that's definitely a good question. So I would say that looks very. I would say leaving any type of legacy on your high school is most definitely a plus, and would it would be a very compelling factor for any individual's application, especially if a college admissions officer might even be, if you, for example, this varies on a case by case basis, but I've heard of officers even asking schools, calling them up, for example, and asking them about how a club is doing, because so and so person under so and so person's leadership, etc. I've heard of this, is rare, but I've heard of that, and I've only ever heard of this in a helping manner. So I
Yeah.
would definitely say that that leaving a legacy, a positive one, on your school through a club is a very good thing for your application.
All right. Yeah, that's good. Club. So overall, I guess, again, for our younger listeners going in, try to get involved with as many, like not as many, but the club that you genuinely enjoy and you see that you could actually have a future in.
Right. And I think that really comes down to by sophomore year, or by the end of sophomore year, I think. So I also wanted to go back and just reiterate a point about the last thing I said.
Yeah.
So I just mentioned again, sort of just how like you want to be a deeper member of a club, and you don't want to you want to add value to it. And I also wanted to say that you want to quantify that in however the club sort of quantifies that. You want to be able to say succinctly what value you added to the club on your Common App, because basically on the Common App there will be a section called activities.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to write about 3 or 4 sentences per activity, right? So you want to be able to discreetly but powerfully describe your involvement. And usually that comes in the form of different awards or a high level position. So that's kind of what I wanted to re-clarify. But
Yeah. So I guess let's talk about some examples here. So in a club like FBLA, right?
yeah,
I'm sure they have like a state officer team, right? So making that team or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Bringing
no.
awards, like state level awards or even national awards to your school. These all look incredibly good on your application. Let's move on. So did you have to do any, I believe it's junior year, there's standardized testing for all, like, I'm not sure what it's called over there, but did you have, standardized testing in high school?
Yeah, so our high school had a day for all of the juniors to take the SAT. We where I'm in the Midwest. I'm Chicago, right? So
Yeah.
this is we take both the SAT and the ACT, with higher emphasis placed on the SAT, and we also took the PSAT as juniors. So our school was yes, our school did give us standardized tests, and it was always the SAT though. So yeah.
Okay, and so you didn't have any. So I'm in California, right? And we have to take the juniors have to take the CASP
I see.
every like in junior year. So what tips kind of would you give them, right? So while you were preparing, I know they're not the exact same test, right? But
Right.
while you were preparing for the SAT and the ACT and the PSAT, right? What are some
Right.
tips you can give for juniors that kind of help them with the whole studying process? Because of course you have to study for these tests and you have to maintain your schoolwork and everything else going on, right? How do you kind of balance all of these things together and make sure that you get the high score?
Yeah. So this is what I would say. I would say that the biggest thing is, and this is kind of blunt, but I think the biggest like determiner of a high score is honestly a person's individual, both practice and will to get that score. Because I really felt like, for me especially, like just doing practice was the fastest way to improve score. And it doesn't sound like anything too fancy or magical, but I think ultimately that is the biggest determining factor. Just sitting down and grinding practice tests, and writing down every mistake you made on another notebook, and then going back and redoing those questions. Sort of having, it all comes down to, again, planning your practice, and practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice does, right? So
Yeah.
really practicing the SAT or the CASP or whatever test someone has to do. This applies for APs too. My strategy usually was to first review the content, and this took place in the form of, for grammar rules, for example, I would go on Prep Scholar, I would go on different websites that had literally all of the rules listed for you, and this, you can just memorize them, put them on a Google Doc, put them on flashcards, do whatever you need to do. And that's how you could do it for writing and math. Reading is, I would say, a little bit harder for people to improve on a case-by-case basis. But I think, again, it all comes down to practice and putting in the time.
Yeah, of course, that's great advice. I also recommend that, just always keeping track of what you do wrong can really help. Right now I'm actually preparing for the SAT, and that's kind of what I'm doing, right? I'm taking a practice test, and I mark down what I did wrong, and hopefully the next time I take it, I won't get that exact same problem wrong. So it's kind of how, like, kind of taking off the things you get wrong, off that list, and make sure you get the highest score you can.
Yeah. And again, just like, I think that what was helpful for me was kind of having a notebook of things that I got wrong, and putting questions that I got wrong on a test into that notebook, and reviewing that notebook before test day even. And, because at that point you'll be reviewing your weaknesses. And I think that it's a very powerful strategy for me in terms of getting less questions wrong and really getting up to that high score. And I think that it's really difficult to, like, it's very different from a 1450 to 1500 compared to like 1500 to 1550, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that keeping the notebook really helped me get those last extra points.
Yeah, that's great advice. I also recommend that. All right, so let's kind of go back to this topic of extracurriculars in your application, right? So how did you spend your time, I guess, during the summers in high school? Freshman summer, how did you, kind of spend your time doing whatever you did, right? How do you kind of manage that time wisely during high school and college, that summertime?
Yeah, okay. So summer of freshman year, first of all, both summers of freshman and sophomore year, I was taking classes at my high school. So I was just it was basically just summer school, right? And looking back, I think that was pretty helpful, because I actually was able to get some classes out of the way. And just in general, I had friends in those classes too, so it was a fun time. It was better than just sitting at home, right? And starting from junior summer, that was when I started actually looking into summer programs and looking into just research opportunities, etc., for high schoolers, maybe even a job, right? And that's kind of when I started doing that through my school's Spark program. I participated in some research and did some work with Northwestern. And that was actually very helpful. It was going into my senior year, and this was with Northwestern University, and was on the Evanston campus. I did some research there with CS and ML actually. And I was very new to all this, but my coordinator was very kind and just very enthusiastic about teaching us material and sort of having us help him. So I think that is something that people can do over the summer.
Yeah. So how important would you say research programs and comparative summer programs are? Like here in California, we have a program called Cosmos. So programs like that, right? How important do you think they are? Should you spend a lot of time trying to get in, or is it something as if you get in, you get in. If you don't, it's okay. You can do some other stuff.
Yeah, I would say it's more of the second one. If you get in, then it's good. It's definitely a great addition, but it's not anything that you should maybe stress about and try to gun to get, because that's unnecessarily. There are other initiatives you can work on. For example, sort of pointing out for a specific example for you, like Cypher, things like that, are also very meaningful and worthwhile projects. So it doesn't necessarily have to just be research, but I think in the breadth of a high school, in the typical high school person's range of abilities, that's probably one of the top things that someone can feasibly do.
Okay, yeah. And you said that you kind of started doing all these summer programs after junior summer, because as you said, freshman and sophomore, you had summer classes from high school.
Yeah.
So here in our area, right, there's Lynbrook High School and other high schools in the area. They don't really offer summer classes that you could do to kind of finish some classes off. So would you recommend kind of what you did in junior and senior summer? Would you recommend for the kids that are listening going into college right now? Would you recommend moving that up and doing it in freshman and sophomore summer, or is it something that should kind of stay later in your college experience or high school experience?
So yeah, I really do feel like it's something that, and I mean, this might just be here, but I've really never seen, and by here I mean Midwest, Chicago area, right?
Yeah.
But I know California especially is crazy competitive, right? So I could see younger kids getting into research, but I don't necessarily think that it's the right thing or necessarily needed to, because I think, those early years, freshman and sophomore year, should really be best spent prioritizing things like extracurricular involvement, grades especially, and then that's kind of what I personally believe that underclassmen should focus on, because I think establishing that framework, establishing a good GPA before junior year is really, really helpful and really valuable.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I would say freshmen and sophomores, maybe not so. Maybe sophomores, honestly, but I don't think freshmen should focus on research.
Yeah, so it's kind of stuff that you should kind of
Yeah.
reserve for later on.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think independently, people can, kids can do research. For example, freshman and sophomore, I would definitely encourage them to independently perform. I mean, honestly, even if they're very enthusiastic about a particular topic, then I would more than encourage them to contact a professor or, independently pursue research. But because oftentimes professors will actually agree to that, but I don't think that it's something that they necessarily have to get that early.
Okay, yeah. All right, so now let's move on kind of to your college experience, right?
Mhm.
So how would you describe, I guess, this transition from senior year of high school to freshman year of college, right? How did that transition, I guess, go for you? How did you handle it? Because obviously there's a lot of pressure, right?
Right.
How do you explain how you made that jump?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, honestly, the first week is where it really is the most different, obviously. And I think that for me, the biggest change was actually not even in study habits, because I think my school really did a good job in terms of having us, sort of forcing us to have good study habits. For me, the biggest change was actually the small things, like people like eating and sort of just having like routines and stuff. And because, when you're in college, you have to, completely organize your time how you
Yeah,
want to. No one will wake you up. No one will tell you to go get some food or whatever.
so the
You have
social change.
yeah. So you really have to, like your mom's not going to be there to sort of remind you to go to eat, right? And she also won't be there to, wake you up if you oversleep or whatever. So you have to plan your day out to a T. And oftentimes it goes how your friends, it goes with your friends, like how your friends kind of plan their day. You sometimes end up doing that. And that's something where I would actually advise against. I would advise you, any potential people who are going into their first year, I would advise any incoming freshmen to develop their own routine, because I really feel like, chasing after friends is something that um, it actually sometimes backfires, because what ends up happening is you feel restricted, and you may not actually have the best routine. So I would recommend every incoming freshman to really focus on the small things and focus on developing a routine that is repeatable and sustainable.
Yeah, for sure. And also going back, so you said that the study habit wasn't really that big of a change. Was this, kind of on par to high school, or is it just the fact that, college professors like don't really care as much, right? Like it's kind of a stigma. It's like, you college professor will just teach and leave. You have to kind of be
Yeah.
independent. Is that true?
So there's a bit of both of there. So I would say, yes, definitely professors are less invested than high school teachers. That's for sure, because there's just a lot more kids in the class, and professors by definition, many of them are there for research, not for. I'm not trying to generalize this. Many of them do love teaching, of course, right? But at the end of the day, the professor is there for research opportunities. So you really have to take your education into your own hands. And professors obviously there's tons of resources. They'll come in for office hours. They'll stay after class to talk to you and help you, but they won't come to you to ask you to see you and stuff like that.
Yeah, you gotta go to
And
them.
yeah, like in high school, for example, let's say you weren't doing well on a test or something. It Even then, I mean, honestly, teachers may not care, but to my experience, I think teachers are more proactive in high school, compared to college if you are doing well, because in college it's treated more as a choice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how is kind of the club scene, I guess, different on college? So I see here, it says that you're involved with the Vanderbilt Investment Club and something called Vandy Apps. Could you explain kind of what those two things are and like your role in them?
Yeah, for sure. So, so first of all, before I'll preface this by saying that clubs in college oftentimes are invite only, and oftentimes you need to apply to them, which was kind of surprising to me, honestly, at first, because I remember at Stevenson that you can literally basically just walk into any
Yeah, you
club.
can just walk in. How does that application process work?
Yeah, so basically the application process, and I'll tell you a little bit how it worked for Vic, right? Because Vic's was decently selective, actually. So what they typically look for clubs like Vic, or at my school, another one's called SCNO, Student Consulting Network Organization, right? So what these clubs look for is a few things. The biggest thing is some experience or proof of passion. And they don't. What this means is they want to see maybe a project that you've done. This is what they wanted to see in Vandy Apps as well. They want to see something that you have done maybe independently, or some proof that you are passionate about the topic that they represent, right? So for Vic, you had to submit a few pitches, and you had to submit a few, basically a few articles of proof that you were, qualified to represent the club as a fund, because the club essentially manages a portion of the school's endowment, right? And it tries to grow its returns every year. And all the students are actually called analysts, and they pitch different companies and different investment strategies and stuff, right? So you have to prove that you can actually format those correctly, that you know how to do those. So you have to submit a few for consideration, and then there's an interview process, and then there's a final decision. So it's almost like applying for, not a college, but it's a bit of an application process, if that makes sense.
So maybe something similar, like applying for like an internship or a job.
Yeah.
Even, right.
Yeah.
And so, since of course you have to go through all this application process, do they kind of like assign like a workload, or is it just something that you kind of like, how does it work? Like, are there meetings? Is it like meetings like in a high school club, right? So how does the meetings and that stuff work?
Yeah. So I would say there's definitely a workload and commitment. You have to be like, for example, for Vic, they expect their club members or analysts again to be submitting at least one pitch per week, or I think it's 2 a month or something, and they have to be very high quality. They have to be a few pages long. They have to have substantive material. Same thing with Vandy Apps is a little more relaxed, but for that club, you still have to show up to. I think their meetings are. There's like a mandatory meeting every month, and then there's meetings every week. Right.
Yeah, really quick. Could you explain what Vandy Apps is? I'm assuming it's some sort of app development club.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, Vandy Apps is it's obviously not just apps. It's sort of like the entrepreneurial minded club at Vandy. What they do is they test and develop student ideas through co-development of apps and different programs, not just apps. Websites, whatever. It's sort of the tech club at Vandy, to be frank.
So similar to like the CS club that you took in high school, or is it more? It's more like student oriented, and they take in ideas and bring them to life.
I would say more of the tech club. It's I would say there's different clubs like at Vandy that are more startup oriented.
Mm-hmm.
This one's less startup oriented. It's more so focused on like new things in tech, just programming and coding challenges, interview process for tech companies, that kind of stuff.
And are you involved in any other clubs on campus?
Yeah, so I'm involved in another organization that is dedicated to volunteering. And that's the National Society of Leaders and Scholars at Vanderbilt, and that's the Sigma Chi chapter. It's not a fraternity, but it is it's a professional fraternity, which essentially volunteers, and it does not have it's not IFC. IFC is Interfraternity Council, and basically the difference between those two is that one is sanctioned by alumni donations from the Nationals organization, and the other is dedicated to like career exploration and different types of networking.
Okay, so how would you kind of decide, right? Because I'm sure there's a great deal of clubs on campus, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide between, the workload and just the sheer number of clubs, right? How do you decide that you want to join these three? Because of course, like something with Vandy Apps, right? As you said, there's other tech clubs on campus. What made you choose that, like Vandy Apps especially?
So I think the biggest thing for me, honestly, was both meeting times, the size of the club. My friends was a big factor. Which ones they were joining. I think, a lot of the other clubs that exist are also composed of upperclassmen because of just the more complex nature of what they discuss, right? So I think some of the higher level classes, clubs that were only open to juniors and seniors. So that's why some of them I couldn't even get into yet. So I think that some of these clubs I joined this year were more so fit my interest in terms of my schedule and also the people who were joining.
Okay. So again, it always just goes back to how does it fit your time?
Right. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing I would say is if it doesn't fit your time, then and there's really no way to make room for it, then it's better to look for a better opportunity.
Well, I think that's kind of all I have for you today. Thank you for being here and attending the session.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. And then I hope I answered any questions for anyone. And I'd love to reach out if anyone needs any other questions. And you can try. I don't know if I should drop my contact info or anything, but.
Yeah, for sure. We could put your email on the website as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that works. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
No problem. And thanks for having me again.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. Follow Inspirante as well at Inspirante_education and follow our podcast on Spotify at Inspirante Education. Thank you for listening. See you on our next podcast coming soon.